Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon, and we're going to talk about creatives staying in their own lane. That's right, we're going to talk about the unintentional side effect of what happens when companies, studios, publishers, etc. become very preoccupied with making sure that their creatives, that their vocal talent, that all of those folks creating these things are of the same race, same background as the characters they're drawing or portraying, in media. And, this is a discussion that's come up quite a bit because of these trying times, recent events, right? That a lot of companies now are taking a look at the stuff they're producing, the shows they're producing, and they're like, hey, yeah, you know what? We're not going to have any white people voice black characters. And it's sort of trickling down into comics now, too, where it seems like comic book publishers, now this has actually been going on for a while, but they're like, well, we're not going to have white folks writing comics about Asian characters or black characters, even if those characters were actually created by white people in the first place, So I'm going to talk about what the unintentional side effect of this might be, which is basically everybody, regardless of your race or gender or sexual orientation, might be forced to stay in their own lane, which I don't think is a very good thing. While I do understand that everybody's trying to be more sensitive and all of that, the unintentional side effect is actually going to be that there are going to be less opportunities for people to work outside of their lane, I guess, their race or gender or whatever their identity is, because everybody's so preoccupied with who you are, not what kind of stories you can tell. And I do believe that certain individuals are going to have a better perspective about certain kinds of stories if the identity of the character is a focal point of the story. If it's not, it's just kind of like, just find the best person for the job, right? I mean, you would think that that would be how they would do it, but this is 2020 we're talking about, and everything comes down to identity politics. All right, so this is coming from Bleeding Fool, not Bleeding Cool, not to be confused with Bleeding Cool, talking about the Master of Kung Fu creatives being assigned by racial heritage at Marvel Comics. And, we've seen this before. We saw it with Black Panther, that Marvel was like, yeah, we're only going to hire black folks to work on Black Panther. But the side effect of that is, I've heard other people talk about this in YouTube videos, that a lot of black creators now are sort of, being relegated to just working on what you consider to be quote unquote black books. And that's not a good situation either. What if you want to write Spider-Man, not Miles Morales, but Peter Parker, and you're not allowed to write Peter Parker because your editor thinks you should only be allowed to write Miles Morales? That's kind of racist-y, isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, a little bit. So new Master of Kung Fu creatives assigned by racial heritage. Of course, they're trying to build up Shang-Chi because they've got a movie coming out. Marvel now with the MCU, they're going to try to promote these D-list characters. Shang-Chi, as far as I know, I don't think he was incredibly popular. I actually, when I was a kid, I read most of the Marvel books when I was a kid. I even read Iron Fist and Luke Cage, and I did not read anything with Shang-Chi in it. Not a standalone book anyway. So Washington Post interviewed Gene Yang, who, I'll talk about Gene Yang. I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a great writer. He did the Avatar books for Dark Horse. He did do the Avatar graphic novels for Dark Horse. He's sort of like the Avatar guy now. That's what he does. But again, I want to talk about the downside to all of this is I think Gene Yang has sort of been relegated to only writing Asian characters and only writing Asian stories. And what if he doesn't want to? I mean, he's done a couple of Superman here and there, but mostly his books have been about Asian characters, because that's of course, because he's Asian, so that's all he can write, right? And he should be happy because that's how these editors think. So they talk about Gene Yang, who's been assigned to develop a new solo book for Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, and what looks like another example of ghetto mentality hiring for assignments to coincide with the planned movie adaptation. This is true. They're trying very hard to make these characters happen, the Eternals and Shang-Chi and all of that, because nobody really cares. Now that they've pretty much destroyed the core Avengers, nobody cares. Okay, this is coming from the Washington Post. There's perhaps no one more qualified to help bring a dormant Asian superhero back to comic book relevance than Gene Yang. The author is known for writing in the graphic novel American Born Chinese and helping to create a Chinese Superman for DC Comics. He received an offer he felt he couldn't refuse when Marvel asked him to be the writer of the Shang-Chi miniseries debuting on Wednesday. Shang-Chi, once heralded as the master of Kung Fu, first appeared in Marvel Special Edition in '73, has his own series until the early '80s in a 2015 miniseries during Secret Wars. Yeah, when I was a kid, like I said, I started reading Marvel comics in the early to mid 1980s, and I didn't really know much about Shang-Chi. So otherwise, he's only sporadically appeared in various comic books. He's not the Black Panther of Asian superheroes yet. Some might even say he's not as popular as the X-Men's Jubilee of the '90s. That's probably true. Yang's involvement with this comic, as well as Hollywood's big plans for the character, could help make him a household name. In the comic, Yang hopes is creating a more authentic, empowered version of the character, and he's being shaped by writers and artists of Asian descent. Now, I have verified with third parties that, Marvel was actually looking for specifically Asian artists to work on the book. And, I did know about this back channel, but, and this is just kind of how they roll now, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But again, the unintentional side effect here is that, and I agree with this, that it becomes sort of a ghetto mentality that we keep all the Asians on the Asian book and we keep all the black folks on the black books, and then we keep all the LGBTQ people. They can only write gay characters. You're not allowed to step outside your lane. And we're going to talk about that in regards to voice acting too. Whether or not Shang-Chi becomes a big name in the movies is one thing, but it's unlikely sales of a solo book will skyrocket to millions of copies because history has proven the source material almost never does this meme. That's true. For authenticity, maybe, but it doesn't equal entertaining writing automatically, and the Washington Post claim ignores the ability of any author to do research to get an understanding of culture. In fact, they're talking about how Yang didn't read the book when he was a kid. He didn't really care. He said he avoided it. He said he admits to actively avoiding Shang-Chi comics at his local comic shop as a kid. Now, as a kid, I went through this period where I was not reading really into my cultural heritage, he told the Post. I wanted to divorce myself from being Chinese, so picking up a comic with a Chinese American hero would almost be like highlighting what made me different. Ouch. The irony is that the same Asian American child growing up to become a force for inclusion and diversity in comics is also not lost on Yang. He hopes that with this new Shang-Chi miniseries, he can reach the same type of child he used to be. If kids went to the comic book shop, so this is, I don't know, this is a very interesting thing. It's a very lengthy article, and basically the point that Bleeding Fool is trying to make is that Marvel, especially, is hiring people within their own lane, and I can tell you the unintentional side effects of that, because again, you look at what Yang has done, and he is talented. The Avatar books were fantastic. I can't fault his writing at all. But he is pretty much locked into a certain stereotype, isn't he? He does Supermans as long as it's, China Superman, made in China Superman. That's kind of like, well, if he wants to do the X-Men or something, not allowed to. Jim Lee was allowed to do the X-Men. Why can't Gene Yang? Now we'll talk about voice actors. And we mentioned this before. There's been a big push for white voice actors voicing non-white roles to leave. And I think in some cases, people were actually convicted and they decided that they did not want to do that anymore, given everything that was going on with, Black Lives Matter and all that, and they stepped down. That's their choice. You're allowed to do that if you don't feel comfortable doing it. And I think that the first couple of people that stepped down, I think it was because they personally felt it was the thing to do. In the case of Hank Azaria with Apu, I think it was because of that documentary, and he just didn't want to deal with it anymore. The guy's got more money than he knows what to do with, and he's like, yeah, this is a hot potato. I don't want to even go there. You know, Apu's been, as far as I know, he's been pretty much kind of retired from the show. Now, in the case of other characters, I think this is part of the Disney mandate. We've talked about this before, that Disney has gone way overboard with their diversity and inclusion initiative to the point where I honestly do think that they were pushing people out of roles. Because you look at the roles that were abdicated in there from The Simpsons and from Family Guy. You know, these are Fox shows now owned by Disney, and they're absolutely going to push for that, right? And what's interesting though is so they pushed out the voice actor, the guy who originated Cleveland Brown, Mike Henry, who's been playing Cleveland for like 20 years, and they basically hired a sound-alike from YouTube to do Cleveland Brown. I get what they're trying to do. I think in cases like this, I think that if a character has been grandfathered in, or grandmothered in, if you'd prefer, I think that as long as you don't have a ton of people constantly complaining about it, or constantly being offended about it, and I don't think a lot of people have been, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think a lot of people have been offended by Cleveland over the years, and I think it was a fairly small number of people that were really offended by Apu. I don't see what the problem is in keeping the original voice actor. Going forward, if you're going to produce a new show, yeah, you probably want to think about it. You probably want to, try to cast a more authentic voice. But I know there was an, Asian American voice casting director, and she's the one who actually casted, I forget, Jenny Slate. Was it Jenny Slate from Big Mouth? And she cast her in that role. And she said she deliberately turns away from the actors so she can just hear the voices. And she was actually very, very offended that they were basically calling her a racist because she cast people outside their race. So, I mean, I don't know if this is going to be like a short-term thing. I think that, Hollywood right now is trying to overcorrect, absolutely. And like, oh my God, let's just everything we can do to, not get hate on Twitter. Let's just start throwing people overboard. And I did not get the vibe that Mike Henry was real happy with the decision. But again, I think it was a Disney mandate. I do think that some other people, they were stepping down because they chose to. I think Jenny Slate stepped down and everybody else is like, we better do this too. We don't want them to think we're racists. And so next thing you know, these voice actors get tossed overboard, so I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be an ongoing thing or if this is just a temporary overcorrection, but I think it's going to have, I really do think it's going to have the opposite effect. I think we're going to have diverse creators who are basically put in a ghetto that they can only work on certain types of shows or work on certain comics. And, it's actually going to cause more tension, I think, more racial tension, and create, less opportunity for people all the way around. It'd be really nice if we just went back to hiring the right people for the right job. That was a thing. Remember when we used to do that? Yeah, that was a thing. Maybe eventually we'll go back to that. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, and we'll talk later.